All right, Doug Risebrough, welcome to the Sick Podcast, Raw Knuckles Podcast, under the Sick Podcast Network.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Raw Knuckles, hosted by Chris Nilan.
Nilan going ballistic. I love it. He's going to hit his own players. He's a madman. He's a freaking madman. Look at him going to town. That'll be a suspension. That'll be a fine. Bring them all out, Nilan, you freak.
It's going to be sick.
Just awesome to have one of my favorite people in the game of hockey, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
And you know where that...
that's mutual. That's mutual.
Yeah. Well, do you know where that started? And it started for me growing up a Bruins fan in Boston and hating the Montreal Canadiens. And I'll never forget Game 5 of the 1979 Stanley Cup semifinal when you played the Bruins.
Right.
It was the first time I went to a game at the Montreal Forum. Now, I had been drafted the previous year. I went to practice in Boston, watch you guys previous to Game 4. I met Howard Grumman, and I told him I was drafted by the team. I'd love to get tickets the next game in Montreal. He said, sure. He looked in the guidebook. He said, oh, yeah, you were drafted by us. Yep, Chris Nilan. Okay, I'll leave you tickets. He leaves me tickets. I get up there. You got tickets for Chris Nilan. I'm at the booth. The lady said, 1 second. She ran and got them. She come back. She goes, that'll be $270. So
That's Irving.
So I found out what the difference between a first round pick is and a 19th round pick right off the hop. But now, game time, they were nice seats. They were Reds in the Reds. And it's the first time I really, because you're always watching Lafleur, this and that, and all the superstars, Lemaire and Schott. And it was the first time I got to see you really up close and personal. I looked at you on the ice with that intense, mean-looking face, and I friggin' love this guy. But I hate him right now, but I love him. Then, fast forward, after your 4th cup in a row, I come to training camp that next year. And you were a guy that I certainly looked up to, and your work ethic, just the way you approached everything. As a young kid, me coming in, it had, whether you know it or not, a profound impact on me. And I'll just never forget that. The first time I really watched you in a game, and it had that impact, and it certainly helped me in my career to get off on let's say the right foot.
Right. Well, the Canadiens, I always found that, and you don't know this until you go in other organizations, but I always found that the veteran players were so good to the young guys, and it wasn't like best buddies, as it was just giving you sound advice on how to do stuff, how to play the game, how to handle yourself. And so I think you try to carry that a little bit, like pass it on. That was kind of your responsibility. And then when you go to other places, and I was lucky I went to Calgary, it was a good organization, but it still wasn't at the level the Canadiens were at when I first went there. And you realize that it was kind of a gift in some ways, that you were appreciative. And, our job isn't work, but if I think back, I was lucky to apprentice in probably the best place possible in hockey, and it was in the Canadiens. What I remember, you want to hear what I remember about you?
Oh, yeah. Let's go.
Oh, yeah. Well, we were hearing a little bit about Chris Nilan, from while you were in the minors there, because I think it was like the 300 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And so you kind of conjure up these stories. This guy's like an absolute madman down there. You better. So now all of a sudden you're up, and there's nobody that's more confident than you, nobody that's more energetic than you. But I do remember that, that borders on sometimes a little bit. You were very respectful. As much as you were enthusiastic and you were funny, you were very respectful of the place you were and the opportunity you had, and you took advantage of it, So, you're an easy guy to like and an easy teammate to be with.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words. That means a lot. But, I remember couple of things about you, and before we go back to your younger days, I remember Hunts came in and we were alongside you. I think we actually played together one evening, and you were constantly coming back to the bench and kind of assessing the shift we just had and what we have to do better all the time. And that really, it caught my attention. And I think it was great for both of us. Instead of coming back to the bench and just, okay, catch your breath, have some water, watch the game. I get it. You have to and be ready for that next shift. But it really, and I remember Hunts too, it rubbed off on him in a way that he carried that forward. Now, I'll never forget, because I'm a young kid. I've never dealt with someone getting traded. And I'll never forget the day you get traded.
That was pretty interesting, wasn't it?
Oh man, I'm gonna tell you, I was friggin' heartbroken. I was. Now, and I say that because, having, forged a relationship, you're a teammate, someone I respected, and going out the door, I had as much, if not more, respect for you in the way you dealt with all that. Because here's what happens. We come off I'll set the stage. We come off the ice after practice. All of a sudden, we're in the back room. Rises on the bike as usual, doing his extra, pedaling away. And the trainer said, "Hey, Doug, you got a phone call." Okay. And they passed the phone over. It had the long cord. You never got off the bike. You're pedaling away. You're talking. And Mr. Grumman had called you and said you've been traded. And now, if that was me, I'd been off that fucking bike in 2 seconds and packing my bag, saying goodbye to the guys, see you later.
Right.
No, you finished the workout. You stayed on the bike. You pedaled your ass off. You showered up, and that's the last I seen you until I played against you again. And I just that left a mark on me. It really did. I said, Jesus, look at him. I'd have been out the friggin' door. Look at him. He's finishing the workout. Watch, he'll do 200 sit-ups now, and then he'll do 100. Like that, to me, that impressed the shit out of me.
Yeah, well, what I remember, which is pretty much like you, but it was a bit of a test that they were giving us, and I had to go against McPhee, and I'm looking at this horse of a man on the other side saying, why do I have to go with him? And they were trying to, get us to go as long and as hard as we could. So I'm thinking, geez, I drew the bad straw here. And all of a sudden the phone rings, and I remember the trainer picking up the phone, and he's saying, oh, he's busy right now. And then he goes, oh, you got to talk to him now. So I don't even know who is he. All of a sudden the phone is being handed to me. And it's Irving, and he says, just want to thank you. I traded your rights to Calgary. I just want to thank you. You've been a good employee. Good luck to you. So now everybody's like, what happened? What happened? What happened? And I'm saying, I'm trying to explain what happened. And you're right. I'm still pedaling away. And I was about to get off, and then I saw McPhee was gassing out. And I thought, I can ride this guy to the end. You know what I mean? So I rode the bike, he finished, and you're right, I ended up packing up and going. So another bit of the funny part of that story that I found out years later, I had the bad knee, and that was kind of one of the things that shortened my career. But I got traded to Calgary, and then I said to the guys in Montreal when I finished the bike ride, I said, send the results to Calgary. When I got to Calgary, they made me do the same bike ride. So that didn't work out. So when I finished the bike ride, I had to go and see the doctor because I had just, you got to get past. In my case, they had to pass the medical. So the doctor comes in and he's giving me the medical, and then he's working on my right knee, and he's shaking it and twisting it and seeing it, and then he's going back to something else. And he comes back to the right knee and he shakes and twists it. And he goes, I'll be right back. And then he went out of the room and he wasn't right back. He was probably 10 minutes. And then he came back in and he shakes the right knee and he says, okay, you can go to practice. So off I went to practice. Well, now years later, I'm in management in Calgary. He got out of the room and he called Cliff Fletcher, the general manager, and he says, Cliff, I can't pass this guy. His knee's too bad. Cliff says, what's wrong with his knee? He says, oh, it's really loose. And he says, he had this repair and I don't think it was totally solidified. So he then says, Cliff says, I want him to pass. He says, you want me to pass him? He says, yeah, I want him to pass. So then I go back, he goes back in, grabs a knee, says, go to practice. So I might have been back with you if you had failed me in the test.
Yeah, tell me what his heart rate is, please. Don't tell me about his knee. Okay.
Yeah.
So
well, I was like you. I never felt I was an upper echelon player. I had a role, and one of that things was conditioning. And actually, I thought it was more, part of the job. But I turned out in later life, I found out it was just something I enjoy. I enjoy fitness. I enjoy working out, and I changed more from gyms to outdoor activities, whether it was hiking, skiing, stuff like that. But I always felt like the irony of this all the injuries I had, I think I have yet to have a surgery on any of these joints. And I'm seeing friends that played that had better joints, knees or shoulders than I did. And for some reason, I just haven't gotten there. I'm going to get there, but I haven't gotten there yet.
I have the new knee, right knee. I need a new shoulder.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I went the other day about my shoulder. I got two torn tendons. One's torn right off the bone. And then I have a piece of bone on the front of my shoulder that's going to fall off. And he said, you need it. There's no way. So I got a cortisone shot, which dulled the pain for me.
Yeah.
I was having a tough time getting through, but that's the last freaking thing I want to do is get a shoulder. I got get the knee. I got screws on my ankle. I'm like, anyway, we could go over my injuries, so we'd be here all day. But that's good. That's really good that you don't have to have that yet. But when I got the knee, it was the best thing I ever did for myself because it was like a bad toothache every day.
Yeah.
Like, people get a toothache, they'll do everything they can to get the goddamn dentist and get relief. But when your knee's like that, it's not so simple, right? So
anyway. That's the one thing. I haven't had that. People told me you'll know when you can't sleep at night because of your knee. Yeah. I haven't had that.
So you're drafted in 74, 7th overall, which so cool. First round. I went through the draft and looked at some of the guys who were taken after you, and I'm like, God, it's scouting. It's just such an inexact science. But, and then there were guys there that I looked at were taking the first round and they're really? But it's easy when you look back, that hindsight. I get it. And now, growing up, get into the game. How do you get into the game of hockey, one? And was Southern Ontario Junior Hockey League same as Major Junior?
No, it was a Tier 2 league.
That was Tier 2. Yeah. So you only played 1 year of junior? I don't get that. So how'd you get into the game?
Well, I think that's, the irony of all of this is you have certain levels of development at certain pages, periods of your time, and when I was a midget player, I was like a third line center when you only had 3 lines in midget, And ironically, there was another guy by the name of Gordy McTavish who was on the same team as me. And he and I would fight out we would both play, but who would play center and one would play the wing. And the next weekend I would play the wing center and he'd play the wing. So the two of us were but then I just got late development. And the best thing that happened to me was staying in that Tier 2 league, not getting drafted. And in those days, they drafted in junior like 30 rounds. So you all thought you'd find your name in the newspaper, and mine wasn't there. And it said, fortunately, I had a junior team at home, which was Guelph, and that became the Tier 2 league. And then that team went on to be national champions than that year, the year I played there. And I ended up getting great development, had great coaches, great development. And you still don't see yourself as anything more than just a player. But the next year I had an opportunity, because in those days, if you didn't get drafted as a 17-year-old in junior, you were a free agent, basically. You could go to any team. Well, the fall after that year, even though the year before I didn't get drafted, after that year, I'm now getting phone calls from 10 major junior leagues teams in Ontario wanting me to play for them. And I'm thinking, and then I had a chance to go to good teams, the Marlies, London, but I decided that, hey, these guys weren't here last year. You know what I mean? I'm going to stay at home. And then I was arguably the best player on the tier 2 team. Basically my decision. I could have gone to junior, but I decided to stay home and play tier 2. I had a sister that was just born. I was going to be able to spend a little time at home, knowing the next year I was probably gone to a junior team. And it all worked out. So, and then the irony of all of this, the other guy that got drafted there on that team was Gordy McTavish, the same guy that him and I were fighting out for the third line center spot. And so it just shows you, and he got drafted by the Canadiens the same year I did. He was in the first round, later pick. So, the idea is you don't know when you're going to get the development. I got the development late, and I got good coaching. I always had good coaching. I always think of that.
Yeah. So Kitchener, did they snap you up? Or
so then the next year I had to be. What they did is they changed the rule for that. So all of a sudden, anybody that had not been drafted was no longer a free agent. You were back in the draft pool. So they had, I think, the second or first pick in the draft, and they took me, and I was living like 30 miles away, I guess 30 kilometers away. And they took me, and they knew I was only going to be there 1 year. Well, then, and we had a good team, but I ended up, that's the year I tore my knee up badly and only played 40 games. So I thought my career was kind of over in a sense of I'm not going to get drafted, and then.
So you must have been shocked when you got drafted then.
Right? Well, you know what it was is, how the agents are on the hunt to, round up clients. And I was in the hospital recovering from the knee surgery. And I got a call from an agent, and he said, I'd like to talk to you. And he had come into town to talk to the whole team. And my teammates were telling me, we're meeting with this agent, and he's coming into town. Well, I was in the hospital recovering. And then he called me and he said, I'd like to talk to you. And I said, why are you going to want to talk to me? I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to play. He goes, I said, I'm not going to be drafted that high. And he goes, you're going to be drafted high. And I said, how do you know that? He says, I just know that. And I thought, I never totally believed it, but in some ways it enhanced my confidence. Well, if somebody else thinks I'm going to get drafted, maybe I will. And then sure enough, and the Canadiens had 5 first-round picks that year. 5. Yeah, so I was one of 5, and I was the second one of 5. But in the end of the day, they had the luxury of taking a chance on somebody who might have not played with an injury that I had.
Yeah, it's incredible. Another thing we have in common is the knee, because when I was a sophomore in high school, I had all my cartilage taken out of my left knee, right knee. And I played my whole career bone on bone. Like, hello. And every year I had, when they started the scopes, every year I had it cleaned out, and it helped me to certainly survive. All those years. But
the other one was, so now I finish up. I haven't, my leg is, atrophied so bad, and it's getting near the end of the season. And I'm like saying, what should I do to recover from this? And the guys just said, you just got to go out and skate. And I looked at my knee, and it looked like 2 pleats and a pair of pants. There was no movement to it at all. And so I actually found a physiotherapist, did some exercise, but I got a call from Jimmy Devlano, who I had no idea who Jimmy Devlano was, but I do remember these big dark glasses. And he was working for the Islanders, and he asked me if I would come out and skate for him. And I did go out and skate on this rink. He had organized it, and he was the only team that did that. I skated around, and I don't think I could have shown him much because I hadn't been skating, but I think he wanted to know if I could just get around,
Yeah.
But again, it was like another element of hope when an NHL team is asking you to skate, and
Yeah.
so, and then I have to say I was shocked that I went first round. I mean, I couldn't have, I wasn't totally, because they had the World Hockey then, and I got drafted in the first round in the World Hockey.
10th overall, right?
They had two drafts. They had a secret draft. The secret lasted about 10 minutes. And I was taken in the secret draft the day before the regular draft. So they had like 2 first-round picks, but I was the first pick in the secret draft, and then they had a second-round pick. And those were crazy days, because there was the 2 leagues competing for you, and you didn't really know what the process was. I remember that when I went to, I didn't go to the NHL draft, but I went to the World Hockey draft, and I was going to meet with the team that drafted me. So, and then I went to the regular draft, not the secret draft. And I remember being in the hotel room with my agent, and he said, "Just sit here." He had 2 rooms, and I'm sitting in the room, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the door, and in comes these guys. I think he was with the Vancouver, I forget what they were called in the World Hockey. And he goes, "Let's get this done. Let's get this done." And I'm like, he should be in the other room signing the player that's in the other room, not trying to sign me. He didn't even know I wasn't the player I was supposed to be signing there.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, they're crazy times.
Yeah, it was. I Punch Imlach, right? Buffalo GM. He took a fictitious player, right? Taro Tushimoto from the Tokyo Katanas. Imagine. He did it. And he wanted to see if someone was going to leak that out or something. And they've since taken it off, the history of the NHL draft. But funny stuff. So the Hockey Night in Canada, the Risebrough family, Saturday nights. Who does Doug pull for? Same team as Dad? Or
no, it was. You know what, Chris? That's a good question. I never really was a fan. I remember thinking all my buddies had their team, and they had their best player. And I try to think of who it was going to be and who it should be. And I couldn't. It wasn't like I didn't want one. It was just like I couldn't figure it out. So I rather play. And even when the games were on, my dad would sit down and watch the TV. My mother was a big hockey fan. She had 5 brothers that all played hockey. Yeah. And so I'd watch like 10 minutes, and then I had to go out and shoot pucks, and play road hockey and out in the driveway. And even though it was dark, you could, play. And so I never really grew up. And then because I was in the Ontario area, everybody thought, well, you got drafted, you'd like to be drafted by the Leafs. And I got drafted by the Canadiens, and I was okay with that too. It didn't matter. It wasn't my favorite team. I didn't have a favorite team.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah,
it's funny. Most guys I talk to do, but you're the first one.
Yeah. And if I started once I started to play at a higher level, if there was somebody that I thought a lot of, was Bobby Clark. Bobby was at that level where he was the hardworking superstar, and I thought, well, that's kind of how I like to play, and I became like a Bobby Clark fan and a Bobby Clark
protege
clone to some degree, but that was when I was 17, 18, not when I was 12. Playing road hockey. Then when you get to work against Bobby as a player and you get to work him as a GM, you can learn to hate him pretty quick.
Yeah, I guess.
He used to always drive me crazy when I was managing, and I'd have you can have some really bad days managing, and I was managing and coaching at the same time. They asked me to coach the team, and in the summer the manager was going to go to Cliff was going to go to the Leafs. So he said, "I've recommended that you become the manager." So I coached 1 year, and then the next year I'm managing and coaching. So now
that's too much.
Oh, great. I can remember when I was in the manager's office, I could hardly wait to get down to the coach's office. You know what I mean? And I get down to the coach's office, and I'd be there, and I could hardly wait to get to the manager's office.
Let me get up here and get rid of this guy.
So anyways, when I was a manager, Clarkie always, if you had a bad game, or whether you were coaching or managing, and the team lost 5-1 or 6-0, whatever. The first call in the morning, for sure, was going to be Bobby Clark. And his first question is out, how's it going?
Yeah. How's it going?
You know, like, how's it going? And you're trying to kind of bullshit your way through it. Well, it's not that bad, you know, but he's just like trying to pick your bones, you know what I mean? And always call you, how's it going? And like, how can it be going when you lost 7-0? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Figure it out, Bobby.
Yeah. Well, he knew what he was called. He just wanted to be the first one to get to the carcass, so to speak.
Yeah. So you go to Kitchener, have a good year there, then you come to that first camp in Montreal. Now, I always I remember my first camp. I was scared to death.
Yeah.
I was nervous. I was like, here I am. Meanwhile, I hated everybody there, right? I hated the Canadiens. I hated the whole thing. I was such a Bruin growing up. Such a fan and getting there. But so the nerves got me. But you coming in that year, you go to camp in Montreal, then you get sent to Nova Scotia, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it was, you know, the camp, I know what you're saying. I mean, I don't know how many times I dressed the morning to go to the camp. You know, you get what should I wear? What should I wear? Put this on, you put that on. You're going up. And I'm trying to dress up, you know, but, you know, not really formal, but way more dressed than I would have gone in junior. Yeah. I show up at the Forum, and all the veterans are in suits, and here I am in my best clothes possible. I'm thinking, oh, this is this is big time. These guys are coming in their suits, and I dress nice, you know. So, you know, it was. I remember a guy giving me a piece of advice. His name was Doug Hearns, and he'd only played minor pro, but I worked with him at a hockey school, and he said to me, "Whenever you think you're tired, you're not tired enough. You know, you always can give a little more." Yeah. And so in training camp, I just carried that through, and I just tried to work as hard as I could. And every time I thought I had done enough, I could do more and I'd do more. You know, I'd come to the bench and think I could do more. And so in some ways, I guess that instilled a work ethic that the team was looking for. So I was the last player cut. Or sorry, I was still the last player, and I was staying at the Windsor Hotel by myself. And sure enough, the first game, I'm thinking I'm not going to play, and Scotty sits Henry Richard, and who's in replacing him? Me. And I'm like, it's not I guess he's the coach. He does the decision. Well, it was not really the right way to handle Henry. You know what I mean? And sure. Henry was played his 19th year. He left and he was going to retire. And Sam Pollock went and talked to him and said, you know, come back. So he came back. Well, I remember now he's coming back. I played my first game. I remember going out, getting the Gazette, going across the street, sitting on a park bench that's right across from the Windsor Hotel. I want to see what they said about the game, and maybe my name would get mentioned. You know, maybe I'd get mentioned. I open the paper, and the headline is "No room for Risebrough," and I'm like devastated. You know, I played my first game. I've given my, and sure enough, I go down to the minors. A couple of days later, the old day, you know, you'd be there for 2 weeks, and I was there for 3 weeks, and then Henry broke his ankle, and that's when they called Mario and I up. Our combined age wasn't the same as Henry, you know.
No, right.
Yeah. And Henry, you know, he was a 40-year-old player who had played a lot of hockey, given his heart to the team, and I think the recovery was really slow. So he didn't get back basically until the playoffs. So in essence, I was thinking as soon as he comes back, I'm going to the minors, and that probably was going to happen. But at the end of the day, he didn't get back until the playoffs, and finished his career. You know, we lost to Buffalo that year in the semifinals.
Yeah, I remember that. Nova Scotia, 7 games you played there, 9 points, right?
Right.
It's incredible. So I look at your path, and it's like, man, you were like streamlined. Boom, you're right to the NHL in no time. 73, 74, you played 1 year of junior. Played 7 measly games in Nova Scotia in the NHL. It's like I guess we see a little more of that today. Guys make it a lot quicker, but back in that day,
Yeah, no.
come on, that's unheard of. You know that.
Especially with the Canadiens.
Yeah.
Especially with the Canadiens. They had,
yeah.
I mean, they had guys that were in Nova Scotia that had been down there 2 or 3 years and really hadn't get a look. And now I come down and, I place the 7 games and then get called up. It was, it had to be tough on those guys. But, I was lucky again.
Fast track.
Yeah. Again, I think it was, I always say this, I didn't intend it this way, but it became a conscious thing that I always used to tell people. You got to get noticed.
Yeah.
You have to stand out. If you don't stand out, people won't see you. And this is what I would preach in managing and coaching. And ultimately, that's what happened to me. I think my training camp was good enough. The Broad Street Bullies had just won the cup their first time. There was an element of physical play that I was probably adding that was not there with some of the other players. And then I go to the minors and, you can see the point totals. I played, the 7 games? How many was it? 4 goals, 5 assists, and 50 minutes of penalties.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I got called up and just, but again, it was, how would I say, it's timing of having good coaches, Scotty, but the players, joining the Canadiens then was easy in a lot of ways. 3/4 of the players had won the Stanley Cup. So there was lots of good advice. There was lots of good habits to follow, and you just had to get in line and go. And basically that's what I did.
So that first season, you end up losing to Buffalo, right, in the quarterfinals. Okay, no big deal. And then, the next year, the next 3 seasons, you played with the knee. You played basically full seasons. You had 80, 78 games, 72. And then the 4th cup, played 48. But all the playoff games, you were there. There's no question. Now, playing, how cool was that? I mean, people don't, when you're playing this game and things aren't going well, okay, you've experienced that maybe later in your career.
Yeah.
Not so much in the early years. Yeah. But I got there during that transition of 4 cups down and things start going. So that there's no feeling like when you're winning and you go in the locker room, right? Like that, 4 years in a row of that. That's like no, actually 5, okay, that first year. Yeah. But it's like you never have. What's a bad day at the rink? When you have that going on, right? What's a bad day?
Well, I think I would say it was positive reinforcement more than enjoyment, right? At the end of the day, Scotty was a master at coaching the team and coaching talented teams, and so he had us on edge all the time, and he was pushing the buttons. I'd say the worst time to have Scotty coaching was when the team was down by 3 or up by 3. You know what I mean? Because he didn't want you to rest on your laurels. So he was pushing and pushing and pushing. And so what you came away with, I think, is a real confidence that you can win. And you had a bit of an insecurity that if you don't do what it takes to win, you're not going to win, and then ultimately you're not going to be satisfied. So it was a positive reinforcement, but not a satisfaction, so to speak. And I remember when the year we won the 60th game on the last game of the year when we played 80 games in Washington, Scotty came into the room and said to us, if you win this game tonight, it'll be the first time in the history of the NHL that any team has won 60 games in a season. So we went 68-12 that year, and you know what? We thought we were with Scotty. We thought we were still in a playoff race. We thought we were like 30 points ahead of the closest team, and we still thought there was somebody chasing us. He just wouldn't let us. He just wouldn't let up, and it was tolerable his pushing was tolerable because we were winning. You know, if you don't win and you get pushed, sometimes it wears thin, but it didn't wear thin because we were winning.
Wow. And so, like, I don't think people can really comprehend the amount of winning. Like your first year, okay, they lost 14 games. Okay, that's 74-75. Okay, way to go. The next season, 11 games you lose, 58 wins. The next year, 60 wins, 8 losses. The next year, one shy of 60, 10 losses.
That's 29 losses in 240 games.
That's unbelievable. And then the following year, you lose 17, and it must feel like the world is crumbling down on you, right?
Right.
What's happened to us?
I think I don't have the stat, but I think in the year we lost 8 games, we lost 1 game in the last 40. So we were just steamroll along. But again, it wasn't like it was this super overconfident group. It was just like, we're doing the right things. Let's just keep doing it. We're doing the right things. Let's keep doing it. Scotty's pushing us. Yeah, that's good. Okay, it's working. Let's keep going, you know. And it did work, you know. And it was a wonderful time. I mean, I can honestly say I enjoy those, thinking back to those days now more than I did playing in them. And if you look at some of the interviews after we win the cup, there's this kind of a sense of relief, you know. It's not like, you know, we just did it. You know, it's not like, oh yeah, we were going to do it. It wasn't a cocky group. It was a confident group.
So talk about leadership. And when we talk about that group, 4 cups in a row, can good leadership, you know, make a poor team better?
Yeah, I think good leadership can create the right culture.
Yeah.
The culture alone doesn't win Stanley Cups. And what that team had, it had a great culture, not just a history of winning, but a culture of winning. You know, I mean, Evan Cornway constantly would talk about how hard we had to work. You got to work hard. We got to work hard. We got to work hard, you know. And he, you know, and yet there was an enjoyment. When I think of Evan Cornway, I always remember him talking to me or talking to us about working hard. And nobody, I told him this the other day when we were together in Montreal, nobody enjoyed scoring more than him. And that included in practice. I never saw a guy so happy to score a goal as he did in practice. His face would light up. He had the great smile, right? He still does. Great smile. So, you know, there was all this. So I think it creates, you know, the leadership can create the culture, but you need talent to reinforce that you're doing the right thing. And that time was just, it was a magical time. I mean, there's 10 Hall of Fame players on that team. You know, the Stanley Cups. I mean, we did this when Serge had the golf tournament. I think the remaining group that was there had 92 cups in the group. So you have this kind of a confidence, but it's not a cockiness, and that's what the leadership would do. And you know, Serge wasn't a talker, but you know, nobody played bigger games than Serge Savard. I remember we practice when we were doing the inter squad games, and the training camps usually break up the teams 4, play against each other. I was on Serge's team, you know, and I thought, we're going to win this. Serge's, and we didn't win a game. And I said, Serge, we got a good team. We didn't win a game. He goes, this is training camp. But nobody played bigger moments than Serge, you know. And then Bobby was the working players captain, because he was a kind of a third line specialist that they ultimately named the Selke Trophy. I don't know how many times he won it. So Bobby had a way of, I think, reaching everybody, you know, in terms of helping them or talking to them. So you had great leadership that I think created the culture, but I think you need talent to reinforce that that's the right thing to do. Because you can do all that stuff, and but if you don't win games, it doesn't bring back, you know, that's the ultimate thing. You got to win the games to get the confidence, you know. Which is more important, do you think? Leadership from the players or the coach? I know you need a combination, but like
I have my thoughts on this.
Yeah, my opinion is that they're both important, but the instillment of the care for one another, the instillment of the passion to practice, the skill of doing the due diligence that you have to put in there, that comes from the players. The leadership, I think, that you're talking about with management is making tough decisions that might affect the game, whether that's how you're going to play or that's who you're going to play against who in the game. So you need both. And I think, players can't coach, and I don't think the coaches can instill. They don't have the same in-depth emotional relationship. If Guy Lapointe gets mad at you, you take it pretty personal, right?
Yeah.
If Scotty got mad at you, he's just getting mad at everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's needed both, in my ways,
Well, I bring it up because I look at 1986 when we won the Stanley Cup here against you guys. Boy, if not for Bob Gainey and not for Larry, like we could have went off the cliff.
Yeah.
Like we really could have. And and Jean Perron was a coach, and I'm saying this, and I know my teammates, a lot of them did not have the respect. I remember Bob said to me once, you don't always have to like your coach, but you got to respect them.
Right.
And I did, to the point until, for me, if I didn't get that respect, it was hard for me to reciprocate, if you know what I mean. And I had a real hard time with that with him. And but anyway, that being said, that leadership that year, to me, that was the year that I really understood what leadership was all about with Bob and Larry.
Right.
It was incredible how they
yeah,
kept.
I mean, but that gets back to they won. They've had the experience. I mean, that's the other thing. I think in some ways, when the team and the Canadiens, they move guys on, guys come in at a moment to be leaders, like Larry. There was Serge there. There was Guy Lapointe was there. He had played with some of the great players, and all of a sudden you can be in your own spot. But when they leave, you got to be in your spot. You got to take over their spot a little bit. And Larry, I don't think there's a better example of somebody that can play at a high level at the right time and instill confidence. Well, if he's doing it, I got to do it too, right? And I how would I say it? I know what you're saying about some coaches too, because I do think there are teams that win that don't have the best coaches. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I think with Scotty maximized that team. You know what I mean? Yeah. It might not have won 4 Stanley Cups if it hadn't been for Scotty. You know what I mean? Yeah. It might not have got 60 wins if it hadn't been for Scotty. And the thing that there was that Scotty was hard on people, and there was that, hey, you don't have to like him. You just have to respect them. And I think, for the most part, players respected him. What I respected in him, and I only found this out later in life when I was in other teams with other coaches, is he took on the responsibility of matching up players or preparing the team to play against another team. And he never talked about how good the other team was. Never talked about it. He would instill a respect for the other team, but he wouldn't say, oh, they got this guy and they got that guy. Uh-huh. This guy can do this guy can do that. He managed all that. He knew that guy was good, so I'll play Bob Gainey against him. You know what I mean? Or I know that player's going to be on the ice. Larry Robinson's going to play against him. I'm going to match Serge and Larry against him. You know what I mean? So he took on that as a responsibility, and he did it, and he didn't. I had a coach who drove me crazy, and he never won, was Dave King. Dave King, when you talk to Dave about the opposition, you were defeated because he would only want to tell you how good the other team was. You know what I mean? He'd say, oh, we got a tough one tonight. These guys, they just won 3 in a row. They got the best power play going. That guy, and I'm going like, it even got crazier because I had to trade Al McGinnis because he was going to sign an offer sheet in St. Louis. All right. And I ended up trading him to St. Louis. I got Housley back and a couple other players. And Dave King was always hard on Al. He would say to him, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. Al McGinnis doesn't do this. So now he's in St. Louis, and we're playing against him, and he's talking about how good he is.
Oh.
And I'm like, so I think that was a shortcoming in his ability to be able to rise to a level as a coach, because he was always worried about the opposition more than he was confident in the group he had. Al McNeil was a great coach that I had, and he was the opposite. It didn't matter who was playing, we're going to win this game. He just, that was the way it was going to be, and there's no excuses. So and so's out, doesn't matter. We're going to win this game.
So, Riser, you do your 8 years with the Habs, Calgary Flames. You go over the Flames. We talked about when you get traded. We play against each other, 86. We end up winning the Stanley Cup. You got 4 cups in a row. You're now 5 Stanley Cup finals you're in your career, which is incredible. How painful, because I know how emotional you can be. How painful is that loss? Because it's almost like, we're gonna win this thing, and that passion and that that you have, and then
right. Well, I'll tell you the story, and I got lucky to redeem myself a little bit. So I was playing the year you beat us, right?
Yeah, I remember.
And, I knew what the Canadiens were all about, and it only struck me when we went to, remember they used to have the Stanley Cup luncheon. It was always in Montreal, right? And when the team was in. And so we're at the luncheon, and the Canadiens are now introducing the history in front of us. They want to introduce the 11th Stanley Cup, Henry Richard, Beliveau comes out, Butch Bouchard comes out. They're all coming out. I'm looking at the team, and they look like we've lost already, because they had this history of winning.
Yeah.
And it didn't strike me until we lost. It was a hard thing. But I thought, you know what? I didn't instill in the players that those other guys don't play. They
don't make a difference.
We're winners too, not just because they won. I mean, there was probably half your team that had never won a Stanley Cup, maybe even less. And ultimately, I got a chance to redeem myself because I was coaching 2 years later when we won against the Canadiens, and I made sure I told them that story. I said, and by then there was a lot of guys that you had left, I think, and there was a lot of guys that hadn't won cups.
Which put your chances a lot better because I wasn't there. I know that.
Yeah. So I just said to them, I said, these guys know no more about winning than you do. And don't let them, don't think that team, because they won all these Stanley Cups, is going to win a Stanley Cup. You can be the team that wins the first Stanley Cup for the Calgary Flames. But when I first went to Calgary, I got to say Cliff Fletcher did a great job. I first went to Calgary. You don't appreciate how good it is in Montreal until you leave. When I went to Calgary, when I played the first couple of games, I can honestly say after I played my first game against the Canadiens, I went into the back room and cried. And it wasn't just because I wasn't with the Canadiens anymore. It was, we are so far away from winning this team that we might never get a shot. And I remember Lanny McDonald came back, put his arm around me, and Cliff did 2 things. He started making deals. He started getting players, and he made a big trade, which I'll talk about. But the other thing he did, Al McNeil, who was with the Canadiens when they won in 71, who knew how to win, who was with the minor league team, was the assistant manager. And I think he was a driving force in creating some of that culture and rewarding players. And Cliff got the right players. And then ultimately the biggest deal that they had to make that year was when they traded Brett Hull. And we got back a a backup goalie, and
Was that Badger Bob there then when they traded Hull?
No, Crispy was there.
Oh yeah,
But
he had a
Badger had
hard
left
time
over.
with a hard time with Hull and his weight because he was always overweight. I know Badger Bob. Badger Bob kept me for Canada Cup.
Yeah.
Before because Hull was fat.
Yeah.
He was fat and out of shape, and he came to camp with Team USA, and Badger Bob freaking loved me, and Hull was fat. He couldn't get up and down the ice, so
he wasn't when I was there. I worked with him because I was assistant coach. He wasn't like that at all. I mean, he was young, hungry, wanted to shoot pucks more than skate. I'll give you that. But in the end of the day, he wasn't like that there. I think it was a really tough deal for Cliff to make because I remember when we made the deal, he gave every one of us a vote. And why I had a vote, I was like first year in management. And he said, do you want to do this deal? And there was probably 6 people in the room that had a vote. There's only one person that didn't want to vote for the deal. It was the manager, Cliff. But he made the deal. He made the deal because I think he thought that these guys, Crispy knows what he wants, Al McNeil knows what he wants, and we got him. And those guys were invaluable in coming down the stretch. We lost Suter in the playoffs, our second best defenseman to a broken jaw. These other guys stepped up, and they were horses. And long series like they can be. These guys just have mattress. These guys were just unbelievable. So we won. So I got a chance to. That's the irony of all my cups. Yeah. My cups are all relate to the Canadiens.
Which is the favorite? I know, right?
One 4 with them, one lost against them, and 1 against them.
Yeah, it's incredible. So what was your favorite one then? You got
I don't know. I don't know if there's any favorite. I have to say.
Boring.
Yeah, I'd have to. I'll go with the first one. The first one for sure, because it's the one you're thinking. In Philadelphia, it was a change of. We played different than the Flyers. We beat them soundly too. I mean, the games were closer, but it was 4 straight.
You stood up to them, right?
And we were ready. We could play all different ways. So that was probably it. And it was, the first one in Calgary was satisfying because you saw more of the process to get there. The Canadiens were, you fell in line. There you had to create the line. You had to create the culture. It all had to come in, And so ultimately, and then losing it and winning it later on was pretty satisfying. And I have to say, beating the Canadiens was satisfying too, because, it's I think it's the first time the Canadiens have ever lost the Stanley Cup at home. And the irony of that too?
Yeah.
When the Canadiens won the Cup, when you won it, you were in Calgary, right? And the game was over.
Yeah.
And you remember the fans all stayed. They all cheered.
Yeah.
They all cheered and stayed, and they all cheered. And then when we won it in Montreal, I thought, this place is going to vacate. Nobody's going to stick around and watch the visiting team get awarded the Stanley Cup. Yeah. And they didn't. They stuck around. Some probably left. And they cheered. And I thought, boy, that's quite. And I remember asking somebody years later, why do you think that they stayed? And they said, they think they stayed because they remember the respect that the Calgary fans showed the Canadiens when they won the Cup in Calgary.
Plus, there was a lot of Habs fans out there to begin with, right? I never understood that until a while. I never understood it. I'm in Vancouver the first time, and half the building is cheering for us. And what the hell is this? But then, I got it. But, you talk about leaving and you cried and you went I remember I left. I never wanted to leave. I never wanted to play for another team, Doug. After I got here, I never, ever wanted to play for another hockey team. It was in me. I was bitten by the bug. And I got to New York, and boy, I remember being in the hotel room and looking at the ceiling. It almost broke me.
Yeah.
It almost broke me. I was devastated. I don't know how guys do it. I don't care. But I went into I know after the game the first time, like obviously we like to drink a few beers back in the day, but I got one thing in Montreal. You never had alcohol in the locker room. On the road, none of that. I got to New York, first game we play in Philly. Afterwards, everybody's drinking beers in the room in there. Hey, you want a beer in there? No, thanks. Then we get home, and I come into Madison Square Garden, and coming in for the game, and in the back room they got fucking shrimp cocktail, fucking, Budweiser, all this shit in the room before the game.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, what is this? So all the guys who were hurt, guys who were injured, would be in there playing cards, drinking beer, watching the game. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? So I was constantly comparing, which I didn't get to identify much that was the same from where I came from. And how am I gonna try and help change some of the culture here, that mindset? And it was really, it was tough on me for a bit. And then
I think that
started getting hurt a lot.
That was the same with me. But I think that in Calgary there was, like I said, that there was an identification of what they had to do to make the team better. So, and then we were playing the Oilers, so you had to really be on top of your game. So there was signs of improvement. You know what I mean? I think there was a cultural improvement, but there was signs of improvement with the players, and ultimately, meaning the team was getting better. They drafted Nieuwendyk, Roberts, these guys. So you start to realize that this team had, so as much as I was thinking we were a long way away, the day I walked back into the weight room and had my little cry, we were back on track pretty quick. And Cliff, like I say, I think Cliff Fletcher's the guy that deserves all the credit for getting the right players, and Al McZeal's the one that was pushing to get the right culture there.
Yeah, and you're certainly part of that, because I look at it now, and you look at, I love looking at the alumni around the league in Calgary. It's unbelievable. The alumni, they have a very close-knit group of guys. That St. Louis is another one, Boston, but it's a good sign when you look at that.
I think that alumni there, it is really good, really strong, and what's made it better is the young guys are really participating in it. It's not just the older guys, and clearly I think the basis of the alumni was built off of the Stanley Cup team. The guys that were kind of in the forefront of the beginning of it, the Ottos, the Pattersons, Merzen, these guys were the ones that kind of got the foundation. But in the end of the day, they also wanted younger guys to participate, and I think they do. And one thing, Calgary is a nice place to live too.
Oh, so
ultimately, a lot of guys come back there.
Jim Peplinski. I had Brian Skrudland on, who I fucking love. Brian Skrudland, I love him. He's like one of my favorites all time as far as the teammate. And he had him on. He said, "Knox, we were talking about getting traded," and he said, "Yeah, I get traded. I go to Calgary." He said, for years I was calling from the bench. I'd be calling Peplinski, "Hey, fucking horsehead. Hey, fucking horsehead." He said, "When I get traded, I'm meeting him in wherever in LA, and I come walking in the hotel, and who's there in the lobby? Jim Peplinski. He come walking right over to me, and he says, 'Hey, Jim, by the way, my name isn't Horsehead.'" He gave it right to Screwy. It was so funny the way he.
But, he's one of my favorites too.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and he was a big part of the culture there too, because he was kind of a holdover from the Atlanta days, and Al McNeil told him in a conversation when they transferred the team from Atlanta to Calgary, Al McNeil told Peplinski, "This is a team of characters that lack character."
Yeah.
He says, "You can change that and be part of this team and going forward and have a good career." So Pepe, I think, took it to heart. Pepe had a great way of reaching everybody. Smart guy. Europeans were just coming into the league. He'd take them on tours in New York, getting pictures with anybody famous. He just had a way of kind of including people. And he does that today. He'll call me and he'll say, "When was the last time you talked to so-and-so?" And I go, "I don't know, in a while." He says, "I think you should
pick up the phone."
I think you should give him a call.
So a couple, I want to get a little bit into the when we look at the Canadiens and the Bruins and that rivalry
Right.
that they had, and that was built on years of beating the Bruins in the playoffs all the time, and plus,
Right.
8 games a year
Right.
against each other, all the preseason games, everything. I remember that, and I used to dread those after a while. I liked them at the beginning because it gave me a chance to prove myself.
Do you remember the one exhibition game you and I were dressing, and you were telling me the story about how you used to sneak into the garden?
Yeah.
You used to go to this game. We were outside. You walk into the garden. You said, "There's the door," and there's a guy there, and he mans the door. And if somebody distracts him, I race in behind him, and then I'm faster than he is. I run to the top of the stairs, and then I'm in the crowd. He'll never find me, So he usually tries to race up and catch me, but he can't catch me. Now we're in the garden, and we're walking around the corridor, and we get right to that door, and all of a sudden the door busts open. This kid runs through the door. He takes one look at you and says, "Hey, Chris, good seeing you," and then takes off. And this old guy comes running up, huffing and puffing, looking left, looking right. He's not going to catch him.
Oh,
that's how I used to get in.
Those were the days, right? You couldn't afford it, and think of today, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Talk about affording it. But those rivalries, and you go out now, Montreal, from Montreal to Calgary, and it's the Battle of Alberta. And
right.
We had the Battle of Quebec, which was crazy.
Right.
That whole Adams division was nuts back in the day.
Yeah.
But you get out there, and it didn't take you long to get in that. Now, I know you're friendly with Glenn Say that.
Yeah.
He friggin' had you on the other side now. And I got to go to the McSorley incident where you fight him.
Right? You have to.
Yeah, I have to. I mean, that's...
So you set it up, and I'll tell the story.
Well, apparently you get in a fight with him while you're playing. Apparently he got the edge on you, which is fine. You're not going to win them all, but the mere fact that you fought him is to me enough. And then you got his jersey.
All right, I'll go from there. I
love that. I love that. You know what? Who gets to do that in life?
Yeah, well, it's not. So what ended up happening is
McSorley
bounces into Vernon.
Yeah.
And then he kind of shoves him, which looked like a punch, but it was more of a shove. And Vernie kind of exaggerated and flips off his feet. And now he's coming up the ice to back check, get back in the zone. And there's a change. The guys are coming off. I just jumped on. I didn't care who was changing. Somebody else had to figure out I was going to get on.
Yeah.
So I confronted him at center ice. And then we had this fight. And I thought I did all right because I didn't get killed, right? But what happened was, how he was the first guy that didn't tie down his sweater. And the next thing I know, I got his sweater and nothing else. And that's when the referees jumped in and I didn't get killed, right? So I get into the penalty box and I got his sweater and I'm pissed off about it, not the fight. This guy's. So I started just taking my skates to his sweater. And I finally looked down and thought I didn't do anything to it. Well, I picked it up and he's looking for his sweater. He's looking over in the box because somebody must have said he's got it. I pick it up and I see all this light coming through the sweater. It's just absolutely shredded. And so I threw him the sweater. Now he puts it on. Well, that's not going to go. So now the referees come over. They go to Sather's. Sather's up on the bench. He's screaming and yelling at me. And they end up getting him another sweater. He gets his own sweater, gets a different sweater in the next period. Game goes on, and Glenn and I are friends, right?
Yeah.
I'm feeling really shitty. Not that he yelled at me, but I just said that was a dumb thing to do. So I called him the next morning, and I said, "Glenn, I'm sorry. He had made an announcement in the media that was the most embarrassing thing he's ever seen in hockey." So I call him and sheepishly say, "I don't know what happened. I had a brain cramp." He goes, "That was great. That was great." I said, "Well, why didn't you say that last night?"
He can't.
So now I think, well, I've made amends with my old friend, and now we're having practice, and I'm trying to stay away from it. Everybody wants to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. So now we're all on the ice, ready to go, and Cliff is in the dressing room. And next thing you know, the trainer comes out and says, "Cliff wants to have a meeting with the players now. So the coach, Crispy, now he wants it now? Yeah. So we all now file in. And here's Cliff walking around the dressing room. His face is red. He's mad. And he's walking around. And we all sit down. We all kind of shrunk down, like, wait, and he goes, as long as I'm the general manager of the Calgary Flames, that will never happen again. So I'm thinking he's thinking about the sweater and getting it shredded, and my head's sinking down. And he says, when I see a guy get the shit kicked out of him like that, and nobody steps in, and I turned to my teammate, it was Mikey Eves beside me. I said, was it that bad? I thought I did all right on that fight. Well, ironically, I never saw that fight until Glenn had his sweater retired. God, it's got to be 30 years later in the Oilers. And they had a dinner the night before with guest speakers, and I was one of them. And the guy had the video of that. And Marty McSorley is in the crowd. He's not at the head table, but he's in the crowd. So they show Marty, they show me, and then they show the fight. I did almost get the shit kicked out of me.
That's awesome. What a great story. I mean, you felt
it's
bad.
not a proud story. It's not like when you say in your career, what did you do? I don't want to put up the shredding, but it did typify how
you
passionate I was.
And passionate, there's no question. How about, you think that's bad? How about me throwing a puck off of Paul Baxter's head? Like, hello.
Well, you didn't put the other part of that story when you try to get down the hallway.
I tried to get him in the
medical room.
Yeah.
Baxi tells the story because him and I were good friends. You hated him when on the ice, but you love him.
Yeah.
He says, there I am. I'm laying down. He's going to stitch. The doc's going to stitch me up. He's got the stitching. And all of a sudden, he hears you yelling down the hallway. You're going to come. Somebody's trying to get you. And he's got all his equipments in there. And as he's about to put the other stitch in his head, he turns to the doctor. He says, just give me a second. He grabs his stick. He thought if you got into the room, at least he could use his stick on you.
That's it's funny. I met him at the draft one year and we talked about it. The way he told that story, he said, I'm laying there and I hear this nut trying to get in through the doors. And he said, Doc, wait a second. He went and grabbed his stick and he lay back down. He said, if he comes through that door, you're going to be stitching him up next or something. But It was, oh God. So when you think about some crazy things and the passion, no question. All right.
I got how much longer? I got grandkids that are crying on me now.
Just quickly, I want to ask you about the game today and what you think of the game, and like, God, like it's missing something. What's it missing? What's it missing?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I retired 2 years ago, and one of the things I said to myself, if I ever get to the point where I think the game is not good and I don't like it, and I don't like players and I don't like coaches and I don't like managers, get out of it. That never happened. So I honestly say I left the game happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that I wasn't dissatisfied with the game. I think what you see today, that's the players are better. There's no doubt about that. The players are better. They're better trained. They got better equipment. Everything is better. They're bigger. They're stronger. It's all that's better. The game is very technical now. The coaching is so good. All of a sudden, you got a very scrummy game because everybody's playing defense. You know what I mean? And they're trying to cover lanes and the crowds around the net, and so it's not an open game anymore. It's kind of as players, I wish I could, without trying to tell them the game was better, get them to understand that with more openness in the game, it's more fun to play because you can go up the ice and you can pass the puck and mistakes are being made. There's no mistakes in hockey anymore, right? They just don't make them. And if they do make them, the coaches compensate for them. So I don't, the other thing I'd say that I'd like to pass on to the players is it's all sports, it's cultures. The culture of society is this way. It's more individual now, and what was fun to be with and very helpful at times was if you had a team that you could surround yourself with, that if you didn't have a good night, you could sneak through a
cover
bad
for
night
you.
and
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
would be fine. You could cover up your own mistakes by being on a good team. Now there's too much attention on some of the top players, and ultimately they don't. The role players don't really have a responsibility. It's all on the top players.
Well, do you think removing the red line hurt the game?
I think it. No, I know what you're saying, but I'd say the reason what it did do to the game is it added pace, right?
Yeah.
It added pace because you could move up the ice a lot faster, and it forced people to skate up the ice faster. All of a sudden the puck goes from the goal line to the red line. You got to get up. So, but what I think hurt the game was that deflection at the red line and in.
Yeah.
So that's part of the removing of the red line, because you're not offside by deflecting it in. So, but it added pace to the game, but it changed the dynamics of the game where players weren't carrying the puck through the zone, right? They're moving the puck up, and it's a free-for-all race up. You know what I mean? And ultimately, then you get into the game in the corners, and it's more scrummy, and it's it's tight.
It's a lot of one and dones, though. I truly believe, I listen to Bobby Orr, and he says, to put the red line back in would help this game. One, it would be safer for the players. They talk about the health of the players, but forget that just for a sec. He said these kids are so good today, right, with moving the puck and handling the puck, that I would love to see them come up the ice together and pass their way through any defense that's thrown at them.
Right.
And when you're thinking of it that way, it makes sense. And I also see how the league doesn't want the old New Jersey Devils or the Minnesota Wild trap machine. I get that, but it especially it can make a team that's very an average team at least be in the game and be able to win.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. It covers it. You got to remember, one of the reasons the red line was put in was because of the trap.
Yeah, I know.
All of a sudden the trap
shocked, you bad boy, Jacques Lemaire.
Yeah. So it was put in because but basically when the red line was out, the trap moved back into the neutral zone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it didn't really eliminate the trap. It just moved it back. Right.
It moved it back from.
Yet it did create pace where guys were coming up the ice, which affects the trap a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because it ultimately, you got to have to make quicker decisions when guys are coming faster at you. But it didn't eliminate the trap, right?
Yeah.
And it's and I don't think, ironically, the trap. When I was in Montreal, Claude Ruel, you knew him. He'd always say, "Lock the middle, lock the middle, lock the middle." That's the trap. That's the trap.
Yeah.
Right. So ultimately, it got a fancy name, and and it was effective, and everybody started using it. And to some degree, I felt like even Jacques. I remember when I got him, he said, I said, "What do you want?" He said, "I want a fast skating team." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because I didn't have that in New Jersey. And the way I had to compensate for that was to create this kind of trap. And the players he says, but they wouldn't get out of it. They wouldn't get out of it, even when I wanted them to get out of it.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't get out of it. So he said, what I had to do, if I get a fast skating team, they'll get out of it. They'll want to get out of it because they want to chase the puck more. So that's what we kind of did. But, when an expansion team beats a good team, you know what they say? Oh, the trap beat us.
Yeah.
They didn't say we didn't work hard enough.
Yeah.
Doug, we got beat by a group of guys who weren't in the league last year. They were playing the trap.
Yeah.
They were getting out skated. You know what I mean?
I got you.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're gonna run up with the grandchildren. Say hi to Marilyn. Tell her.
Yeah, I will.
Please.
You're doing a good job on this. You made me feel really comfortable.
Well, I appreciate it.
And maybe there'll be another time, but don't wait.
I'd certainly love to do it again at some point, and enjoy the family. And again, thanks so much. One of my all-time favorite teammates, Doug Risebrough. Awesome stuff, Dougie.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Raw Knuckles with Chris Nilan on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.